I'm Sunny.
I'm Randy, and this is Bourbon, Wine, and True Crime, a podcast where three self-confident but unsure friends sit down once a week to drink together virtually and discuss true crime. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
I don't have imposter syndrome. You have an imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I do.
I was like, why did you have to go there? Why do you have to expose my deep, dark fears and insecurities to everyone?
That's what we do here. That's what we do.
Never. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited because I'm finally on brand with my wine in my witch's cup. I have wine. Look at this.
In a witch's cup. I love it. What kind of wine are you drinking?
I'm drinking 19 Crimes.
Oh, even better.
Oh my God, you're so on brand. Look at you.
Back with a bang. What are you guys drinking?
Sunny, what are you having? I'm
supremely not on brand for a multitude of reasons, like not on brand for us or me. Like both don't fit. I am drinking Flying Embers hard kombucha. And I will spare everyone how I feel about kombucha in general. But I do like hard kombucha just because of the taste. Tried some at a local place here and I was like, ooh, so I don't know. It's kind of nice. 8.5, little nice. 8.5 action.
So 0 out of 4 stars, what would you give it?
Honestly, I'd give it like a solid, maybe like 3.2 to 3.4.
That's pretty solid.
Yeah, it's good.
Awesome.
AJ, what do you got going on?
I have my very pretty tumbler and it has some Pinot Grigio, just a little iced Pinot Grigio because I'm white girl basic like that.
Oh, I like it. Well, speaking of white girl basic or basically lack thereof, what are we talking about?
I have to tell you a story first. So recently, Pedro and I went to see Sunny in Las Vegas, right?
Yeah, you did.
And I was dying to tell you the story the night we went to dinner, but we got distracted. We started getting ready and it just left my brain. And I was like,
well, we were busy looking really hot. And
it's a lot of effort to do that.
It's a lot of brain power looking really hot.
But I completely forgot to tell you about the horrible, amazing thing that happened to me. So the first day we're in Vegas, we get to the hotel, we check in and everything. And it's still like pretty early afternoon. So we go down to the pool. It's maybe like 4 p.m. And I have this like little over the shoulder tiny like carry purse, and we sit down next to one of the lazy rivers, and then it's 5 o'clock and the lazy river closes, so we move over to the pool. And we were going on this like really big fancy dinner that night, like that was like our date night. And we get up to leave and the pool is closing and I'm like, where's my purse?
No.
And like the blood like leaves my face and is like pooling in my stomach, and I'm about to throw my guts up, and it's nowhere to be found. It had my cell phone, his cell phone, his wallet, my driver's license, my credit card, my debit card. It had everything in this little teeny tiny purse. And so I'm like having a meltdown, but trying to keep it together, and we get up to the counter of the pool, and I'm like, has anybody turned in a purse? It's a little tiny black leather. It has a hand painted butterfly on the front. And he's looking around. He's like, no, I'm so sorry, but there's no purse here. And like, I'm about to burst into tears. Like, I'm like sweating profusely. I'm like sick to my stomach. I'm like, there goes our whole trip. Like everything was in that purse, like your stuff, my stuff, our identities, like everything, like we might as well just go to the car right now. And this woman, so I'm standing in front of the counter. Pedro is standing to my right. And this woman comes up like behind me and he can see her. So he's like turning his head and he's like watching her and he's got this like look on his face. And she goes, did someone lose a purse? And like leans over me with this black little leather purse with like the hand painted butterfly. Like, and I had described it exactly to the attendant. So like they knew like that was my purse. Like, I think I lost my knees out from under me. I hugged this complete stranger in bathing suits. Like, oh yes, I love you. Thank you so much. Like,
oh no.
I don't know how to explain that.
Oh.
I don't know how to like,
How would you have even made it back home?
I don't know. No phones, nothing.
There's nothing I can do.
There's nothing I can, exactly. There's nothing I can do.
There's nothing I can do.
I've been dying to
Oh.
tell you that story, and I wanted
Well-
Randy to hear it, and I was like, I just gotta save
Well,
this. I gotta save
thank
this.
goodness. I mean, there was the time that do you remember when I had a purse that looks like an old sandwich?
Oh, I
Kinda
do.
Yes, I do. That's a
So the
very
time-
good description of it.
It was an old sandwich, and I accidentally left it on the top of my car one time, and I drove off.
Well, you thought it was a
And-
sandwich, so
Well, it was a while before I realized what had happened. And fortunately, even though it was in this very public like area on the street, when I finally did find it, thank God, it looked like an old sandwich in the gutter. So like nobody had touched it. So, the moral of the story is don't
carry an old sandwich.
carry an old sandwich. That age-old adage, carry an old sandwich and your
Oh my
money will be
God.
safe.
An old sandwich a day keeps the thieves away.
Well, so AJ, I know that the topic today is very special and important to you and to me. And well, it really ties all three of us.
It absolutely does.
So
I'm so
what-
glad you brought that up.
What are we talking about?
We are going to be talking today about the desert killer, who is I would say he's kind of a lesser known serial killer, but he's pretty prolific, and he is right here from our hometown of El Paso, Texas. So yeah, we're
Oh
going
my
to be
gosh.
discussing David Leonard Wood today.
I am stoked that we get to talk about El Paso because that is, I mean, it is the birth of our friendship. It's the birthplace
It
of all
is.
of our
It's very
kids,
special.
our
Chuco
friendships.
Town. I mean,
So if you're okay with it, I have a couple things that I wanted to talk about regarding El Paso. And per
Ooh.
usual, it's a charcuterie board of things that don't make a lot of sense together. But when I was thinking about just things to share about El Paso, these were sort of front of mind. So wanted to start
I'm
out.
a little nervous. I'm
Okay,
gonna
I
be
promise
honest.
none of them,
'cause-
they all innocents are protected in the fun facts about El Paso.
Okay.
But we're going to start out with just some regular ones, just a couple.
Should
a
we
few
tell
fun
everybody
facts.
that that's where we all met each other? I think
Well,
we
that's
should
why I
say.
said
I think
it was the
Yeah.
birthplace of our friendship.
it's the birthplace, but let's just be a little more clear. Like over a decade ago, that's where all three of us met each other at UTEP, and through friendships, and we all got connected through Sunny. And I think that's a very valid explanation. But yeah, it all
Yes.
happened here in El Paso.
So here's a fun fact that I think is very relevant for us trying to get together. El Paso is the only major city in Texas that works on Mountain Standard Time, confusing outsiders galore. So you guys just had to be special
Confusing insiders
and pick
too.
a stupid time zone.
It confuses us all the time.
Very
It's not
confusing.
it's not just the outsiders, it's us
Yeah,
too.
there's Mountain Daylight Time, but no, just you. You went with Mountain Standard Time.
Sure did. There's nothing I can
also,
do.
if you're a person that enjoys more vitamin D than the average bear, which I do, it has usually on average over 300 days of sunshine per year,
Ooh, I'll take
which
it.
is awesome.
It's terrible.
And while it is currently nicknamed the Sun City for that reason, it used to be known as the six-shooter capital.
Oh,
And that's partially because railroads were running through it back in the 1800s. And so it was it was an area for a lot of Wild West newcomers. And it was a violent and wild boom town known as the six-shooter capital because of its lawlessness.
I believe that completely.
Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah.
Also, while there's a fight between El Paso and Juarez over this claim to fame, the tequila-based margarita may have been invented there.
I have heard that, and I'm
Yes.
here for it. I will die on that hill.
Yes. So one of our favorite drinks may have been invented there. And just random, which you would know if you're from there, there used to be live alligators kept in the downtown plaza.
Excuse
Sure
me?
was.
Unclear why.
Yep.
That was my very next question.
Unclear why. Just they kept them there. And right now
It was lawless
they do have fiberglass alligators there now,
in
but
San
yes,
Jacinto Plaza.
yes, but they used to be live alligators.
I remember that when I was a little girl, like we would go down to San Jacinto and you could go to the water fountain and there were the live alligators at San Jacinto. I remember, that's how old I am. I just outed myself. Yeah.
So they are not there any longer, but they were for quite a bit of time. And although I realize that we are technically out of spooky season right now, I think it is worth noting that there are a number of fairly notorious haunted places in El Paso where if you're from there, you've been to these places more likely than not. A couple notable ones: Concordia Cemetery, supposedly haunted by the 60,000 people plus that are buried there, including the Buffalo Soldiers and quite a few Texas Rangers.
Oh,
I think Pat Garrett is also buried there, and he shot Billy the Kid.
Yes. So lots of locally famous, semi-well-known people buried there. Southwestern
locally famous for sure.
Locally famous.
Yeah. Randy's looking at us like, huh?
She's like, I don't know who
I
that
know
is.
who Billy the Kid is, and that other name that you said.
That one other guy. Totally. There is also Southwestern Hospital, which was used as a sanatorium in 1905 for tuberculosis, and supposedly a nurse who preferred to take the elevator was pinned between 2 floors and died, and also haunts it.
New fear unlocked. Thanks.
Fun fact. That's where I was born.
Southwestern Hospital, spooky from birth.
We solved it.
We've solved it.
You can like still drive up there and like look at the building, and my mom is always like, you were born right in there. And
right
like, really
in
creepy.
there, in between 2 floors on the elevator, pinned between. So there's also Plaza Theater, where one has seen many a musical. There's stories of a spirit that sits in the back row of the theater, and then a girl who is seen giggling in the mezzanine.
Absolutely.
And a smoking man who reportedly sits on the balcony. Rumor has it that he's talked to staff and has been seen diving headfirst over the balcony.
Oh, that's cool. Who wants to go with me next time to the Plaza Theater?
If I hear a giggling child, I am yeeting myself out of the nearest window. Randy, that was just the little ones. Nope, don't. I'm out. I'm gonna head out.
La 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 la.
I love the Plaza Theater.
There is also the DeSoto Hotel, where people who have stayed there have claimed to be bitten, scratched, and touched while they're in the hotel. And people who have gone there ghost hunting claim they've picked up on the presence of a spirit in the basement. And of course, there is again, if you're from there, you know this, but the notorious El Paso High School.
Yes.
They have confirmed secret bricked-in passageways. And it's semi-confirmed that there was a girl who jumped from the balcony to her death, and that her ghost also haunts it. I have heard weird things in the theater there, and others have too. So a lot of activity going on there. And then one of my favorites, which when I tried this, it didn't work, but I have friends that claim that it did work, on Thunderbird Drive. If you put your car in neutral and you sprinkle baby powder on the back part, you will be pushed up the hill by phantom spirits and find handprints, little child handprints, on your trunk in the baby powder.
Why would you do that on purpose though?
We sure tried. It didn't work, but
so the alternative story to that is that on Thunderbird Road, a bus carrying small children was in a horrific accident decades ago, and it killed all of the occupants, and so the little children start to help with the vehicles up the road so that they don't meet the same fate.
Oh,
and the DeSoto Hotel burned down, so that's really sad.
Boo.
That's a really shitty afterlife. Just hang out on this railroad crossing and push cars out of the way.
Push cars.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Thunderbird, that's I lived near-ish there, so those are some of the most haunted places. And then the other part, and we're going to circle back to this a little bit later, but if you are from El Paso, you are familiar with things called El Pasoisms.
Oh, good.
One of them is a favorite one that AJ, you have a tie to this one, but this is a rabbit hole you could go down forever, but I'm going to say a couple of my favorites. So one of the classic ones that you'll hear is, I'll tell you right now. If somebody says, I'll tell you right now, that means they're going to tell you later.
Or you're never going to hear it.
Or you're never going to hear it. So enjoy El Paso. Welcome.
Yeah.
Another word that people say is barely. And so in normal context, you might say that, the phantom spirit was not quite visible. In fact, he was barely there. Whereas they use it in the context of, in fact, I'm just going to link it to the last thing. I'll barely tell you right now. Which means, or it barely happened right now, which means it just happened. So barely equals just. Another
accurate. That is so accurate.
Another common too is just using the word look it instead of look. So even when at wouldn't be part of the normal sentence, look it. And then you hear people say the word da instead of the, but intentionally emphasizing it, like da club, da
the club.
It's so another word that you will hear there is jumping balloon instead of bounce house.
That's not normal.
Yeah, we'll see if you're from there, which I thought jumping balloon was normal. Apparently it's not. Jumping balloon.
I'm just realizing that I only spent 3 years in El Paso, and 9 months of that I was in Afghanistan. So it's really 2 years and 3 months.
So jumping balloon is not something that other people say.
I'm just here sipping wine.
And then my last one, my favorite one. So if you tell a waitress, I would like a Coke, she will ask you the question, what kind?
Yes. What kind
and
of
that
Coke?
is because Coke equals literally any soda.
Yes.
At all.
It does.
So you could be wanting a Sprite.
Yes.
But yes. So Sprite is Coke.
You could be wanting a Pepsi.
Coke, everything. So the few times that we have been out and AJ has said, I'd like a Coke, they say what kind? She says Coke. And then they say, is Pepsi okay? And then she says, is Monopoly money okay?
Pepsi and Coke are not the same. Pepsi's gross.
Thank you.
All things are Coke. So everything's Coke. And I have something for at the end of this that will tie back to El Pasoisms that is going to make us, you're either going to love it or hate it. But in the meantime, that's what I have as an introduction to the weird world of El Paso. And I'm very excited for the case.
I am here for it. I loved it. Cheers, ladies. Everybody take a sip.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oh my goodness. That was awesome.
Charcuterie board of El Paso.
That was
the charcuterie board.
The charcuterie board.
This reminds me of from Chicago. They say the Bears.
I loved every second of that instead of the Bears.
I was just here for it. I'm just vibing.
I love it. Well, let's dive into the monster who is the desert killer.
Take us away.
David Leonard Wood. Okay.
Oh, another David.
Another David.
So many.
David Leonard Wood was born on June 20th, 1957 in San Angelo, Texas. The second of 4 children. In the 1960s, his father, Leo, moved the family to El Paso. So now he's like 3-4 years old. And they moved to El Paso, where he held an executive position with the El Paso Electric Company. While the family was considered well off, their private life was troublesome. So you have this typical kind of Americana family. Dad's working full time, mom stay at home. They have 4 children. It's very idyllic. But at home, it just was the complete opposite.
Hey, AJ.
Yes.
So you probably already know this, but do you want to guess his zodiac sign?
Let me see. June 20th. He is a Gemini.
Yep. Which tracks with what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. A lot of duality.
Yes.
Okay, so early 1960s, David Wood his mother was Betty, and she started to show signs of mental illness. When would you have 4 kids? I mean, why not?
That's fair.
That's fair. It's called motherhood. So Betty began to argue frequently with her husband, and it was so much so that they began to just like ignore their kids completely. So by the mid 1960s, Betty Wood was committed to a psychiatric hospital for 6 months, where she was treated via electroconvulsive therapy.
Our favorite.
And that's exactly what it sounds like. So his mother was treated via electroconvulsive therapy. All right. So while she was allowed to return home after her release, she was prescribed drugs that she would later begin abusing, further deteriorating her mental health. So due to the numerous problems between them, Wood's parents paid little or no attention to their children. And David and his siblings were sent off to live with relatives in Chaparral, New Mexico, which is not that far away from El Paso. It's it's in very close proximity. But unfortunately, they were also sent from relatives to various and assorted foster homes. So they bounced back between foster homes, relatives, and then right back to their parents. So when David was 13 in 1970, that's when his parents divorced. But they remarried because they're such a great match in 1971.
Right.
But divorced again in 1975. So that's, a little bit of history about his parents. So Wood from an early age was described as nervous and hyperactive. I mean, same. So much so that he was admitted to a hospital and given medical treatment, due to which he had to repeat the first grade of school. Eventually, he lost all interest in school, and due to his failing grades and truancy, he had to repeat the 3rd grade and 9th grade. So if we do the math, a lot of this does chronologically kind of line up with when his parents were going through the most turmoil, and his dad would focus his anger on David, often beating him with a paddle when he misbehaved, and not only when he misbehaved, but when he didn't misbehave. So he was getting a lot of the anger from his dad in these time frames. So 1st grade, 3rd grade, 9th grade.
So does that mean he was 17 going into the 9th grade?
As a freshman? Yes, exactly. Oh, yeah,
that's
16,
rough.
17 years old.
Yeah.
And I have some of those in my freshman classes, and I mean, as a teacher and a student, it's difficult. So yeah. So he had to repeat the 3rd and 9th grade. By his own admission, he had claimed that he began feeling sexual attraction towards girls at an early age, and even lost his virginity at age 12. So that's a 7th grader.
Not that uncommon, especially in El Paso.
That's a 7th grader. It's just very alarming.
Was it common back then, that young, in the 70s?
I just don't think it was talked about personally.
That's fair.
Because a lot was going down. Yeah. I can tell you.
I don't think it was anything, we're not new in this generation on exploring like early sexuality, but I just don't think it was talked about as much. So yeah, I think it happened a lot.
Yeah.
So by the early 1970s, Wood began spending most of his free time outdoors, during which he developed an addiction to alcohol and drugs. So we have a developing brain who's now engaging with drugs and alcohol, and his frontal lobe is like not cooked.
Yeah.
So in 1974, at the age of 17, he quit Parkland High School after the 9th grade and attempted to enlist in the Army, but he was rejected.
What? For what?
I could not find out why.
That is wild.
Did he show up naked for the interview?
Well, I mean, I don't know much, but it's the 70s. He's a high school dropout with a 9th grade education, and he's 17. Yeah. I think we're going to get into it a little bit later, and we can speculate wildly, but I don't think that we can come to a conclusion as to why he was rejected, but it will come up a little bit later. Okay. So he tried to enlist in the Army, but he was rejected. And because of this, Wood had to resort to manual labor and odd jobs to make a living for a few years. So this is the mid 1970s. So now we're looking at August 1976. So he would have been 19 years old. Mm-hmm. So he was arrested on charges of indecent exposure and sexual harassment of an underage girl, for which he was convicted the following year, so 1977, and given a 5-year prison sentence. Ask me how long he served.
A year.
Nope.
Less?
Nope. He served 2 years.
Fucking scumbag.
So, underage girl, indecent exposure, given 5 years, only serves 2, and he was granted parole and was released on December 28, 1978. In March 1980, he committed 2 rapes 8 days apart. In the first incident, he raped a 19-year-old female acquaintance, and in the second, he raped a 13-year-old girl whom he did not know.
Ew.
Okay, so he was found guilty and given a new 20-year sentence.
That's it.
But that's it, 20 years. During his incarceration, Wood developed a reputation as a model inmate and underwent several sex offender rehabilitation programs. After serving only 6 years of his sentence,
I was choked on my wine. Are you fucking kidding me?
6 of the 20
for raping a child.
2 girls in 8 days. One is a child. Both are children if we want to argue correctly, but one is definitely a child. So he gets paroled because he went through sex rehab, sex offender rehab programs.
Sexual sex offender sex rehab, sexual sex.
Yeah, all the sex.
Sexy.
Sex. Okay. So after serving only 6 years of his sentence, Wood was again granted parole and released on January 14th, 1987. I was 6. Whereupon he returned to El Paso. So he'd served this time in New Mexico, goes back to El Paso. Shortly afterwards, he finds a job at a furniture store, but he occasionally moonlighted as a laborer and auto mechanic. In his spare time, Wood frequented various bars and nightclubs, favoring those with topless dancers. Shocking.
Those poor women.
Not disparaging those women. Like,
no,
just him being odd.
Him being weird and creepy and gross.
We were just talking about that today at work, and I don't know how I got on the topic. We were talking about sex workers, and I was just like, they need to get more things, because I couldn't imagine doing a job like that where you're letting people that you're maybe like, just like, I don't know. I don't want to say too much and like act like I'm coming across as like distant sex workers, but props to those people, because I gotta know somebody for like a year before I want to let them touch me. Like the whole topless...
but they just need safety parameters.
They need safety and they need healthcare.
Exactly.
They need to be safe. They need to be trusted. They need to be listened to. You know, like, why is that so much to ask for? You know,
right.
And that's when it becomes survival work. It's like, even though this is the most thing I hate, but if it's going to feed me today and it might feed my child, then this is what I'm going to do to survive, regardless if it puts me in the complete position where I'm uncomfortable.
But not even
However,
that.
as we're going to see, like, he's a big fat liar.
I hate him already. Mm-hmm. Okay, sorry.
You're definitely allowed to. Our mental health is not our fault, but it is our responsibility.
Correct.
Okay, so what blew this whole thing up? Like, why are we even talking about him? What was the bombshell that really cracked open who David Leonard Wood is? So here's where the life starts to unravel for him. So he's out on parole. He's released in January 1987. So a woman testifies in July 1987, so same year he's out on parole, that she had been walking outside of a convenience store in the Northeast El Paso when a man identified as David Wood and, matching his description, asked if she needed a ride. The woman accepted his offer, but Wood did not take her home as directed. Instead, he stopped at an apartment complex and went inside. When he returned, a piece of rope was hanging out of one of his pockets. Wood drove northeast of town toward the desert. After driving around the area for a period of time, he stopped the truck, got out and ordered the woman out as well. He explained to her that there was a shipment of cocaine buried there and he had to get it.
What the fuck?
He had to stop the truck. He got out and he told her to exit. She saw him get out a, quote, brownish red blanket and shovel from the back of his truck. After tying the woman to the front of his truck with a rope, so now she's like hog-tied to the grill of his truck, Wood proceeded to dig a hole behind some bushes. So she's awake, she's aware, and she understands that he's digging a grave. So 10 or 15 minutes later, he returned with a blanket and began ripping her clothes off and forcing her to the ground. While he's doing this, he thinks that he can hear voices a little in the distance, and he orders the woman back in the truck. So he like abandons that area and he gets her back in the truck, and he drove to a different location in the desert where he stopped his truck, ordered her to get out again, tied her to a bush, and raped her. Immediately afterwards, Wood stated again that he heard voices and hastily threw his belongings back into the truck and drove away, leaving the woman naked in the desert. But before he left, he turned and he looked at her, and this is the report, was that he told her, "I'm out there, and if you tell anybody, I'll come and find you, and you know I'm out there." Oh. So he leaves her with like a final warning. So she's able to get herself free.
So awful.
And get to safety, and then she reports it after that. Okay,
that's a bad bitch for reporting it, though.
That is a bad bitch, man. Oh my God, like, yeah. Thank God he was either hearing voices or there were actually voices. I don't know. Mm-hmm. So about a month and a half later, the woman called police. So she finally gets like the courage to call and report it. On September 22nd, 1987, she directed them to a scene of the rape in the desert. She also directed them to the area where Wood had done some digging. So she takes them to both locations, the initial place where he did digging, and the second location where he threw her back in the, or he got back in the truck and left. So this is the location where he was digging, where other bodies were located. So the police officers are looking at this location, and this is where she reported it. But let me back up a little bit. So that was her experience, right? And she takes the cops to this place where David Leonard Wood had done the digging. But if we go back to just August 1987, workers for the El Paso El Paso Water Utilities were out in that same northeast area. So it's McCombs and Dyer. So
very familiar.
Very familiar. Like that's a very trafficked place now. And it goes goes out. And so it was very much like in the upper region where there's a lot of desert. So in August 1987, these water utility workers are going out there, and in a very shallow grave, there's some remains sticking out. And immediately they call 911, they call the police to come out there. And in August 1987, there's 2 bodies found. There's 2 sets of remains. So that's where we're going to pick up our story. So police were called to the crime scene, and while investigating the area with canine units, accidentally discovered another set of human remains about 100 meters away in another shallow grave. So the first set of remains were discovered, and then there's a second set of remains, and this is all separate of the girl that was raped and tied up. All right, so the first set of remains, so when the water utilities workers went out there, the first set of remains were determined later to be of a missing girl named Rosa Maria Casio, my apologies, Rosa Maria Casio. So both sets of remains were ultimately identified by family members via their clothing and personal items found at the crime scene. Casio's cause of death was tentatively ruled as strangulation because her jaw had been broken in 2 places. Jeez. The other set of remains were later identified as Karen Baker. And Karen Baker's cause of death could not be determined by her body's advanced state of decomposition. So investigators speculated that her remains had been out there 3 to 6 months earlier than Casio's. So she was buried first and then Casio. So Karen Baker's remains were identified. Karen Baker had 3 small children at the time of her death. She was 20 years old, and she was described as having a troubled past, but seemed to be starting over and had enrolled in beauty school and was concentrating on her children. She disappeared in June of 1987. Rosa Maria Casio, she was only 20. She was a waitress and topless dancer in Addison, Texas. But she had planned to re-enroll at Brookhaven Community College, and she was visiting her sister in El Paso when she disappeared in August of 1987.
He was released in 87, correct?
Yes. In
oh my God. Oh.
So we're bouncing on dates just a little bit, but I think we can follow because it's just like within months of each other.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
so Casio was the waitress, and she disappeared visiting her sister. Okay, so on October 20th, 1987, there were some hikers in that same area, and they accidentally discovered the remains of another human. And they even stumbled onto another set. And so these two sets of remains later became identified as 14-year-old Desiree Wheatley and Dawn Marie Smith, and both of whom were also buried in shallow graves close to one another, about 1.5 kilometers away from those of Casio and Baker. So what we will have for our listeners, obviously, who may not be acquainted with El Paso geography, I'll have a map of the area for El Paso where these remains were located, as well as pictures and information on the victims. Okay. So Dawn Marie Smith and Desiree Wheatley are both located very close proximity to Casio and Baker in very similar fashions. They were all face down, shallow graves, same.
Like, bro, have you not heard? It's literally
area.
called 6 feet under. Like, this is just a thing that all of us know. 6 feet. It's called 6 feet. 6 feet down. 6 feet down.
There was a theory that he was kind of creating his own like community, and that he was burying them in pairs so that they would never have to be alone.
Great. Sounds great.
He was burying them face down so that they wouldn't look at him.
I was gonna say face down for me is somehow makes it worse.
I personally think that this individual is just a monster, and I don't think that he had any real deep thought about how or why he was burying them the way he did. I think that there was an MO of quick, easy, bury him, done, throw him in there.
Not any thought.
I don't think that there was any deep thought or connection to that, but I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a medical doctor. I don't know, but I think he's just
There's nothing I can do.
There's nothing I could do. Hashtag there's nothing I could do. So Desiree Wheatley, she was identified because she was wearing a very specific t-shirt. It was the very last days of school, and she had worn this t-shirt so that all of her friends and classmates could sign it. And she was very excited about that. So after school, her and her friends hung out a little bit, and then they went to a convenience store, and Desiree was seen wearing her t-shirt, and it was signed by all of her friends and classmates. And the convenience store clerk had observed the young lady and a weird looking Caucasian male in the convenience store kind of gawking her.
What other kind of males are in convenience stores other than
I can't think of any.
Odd.
That's the only kind, honestly. That's it. And he was described as being like lots of tattoos, kind of scruffy looking, tall, Caucasian,
heavy breathing near the
weird.
weekends.
Yeah, it gave everybody kind of like this weird vibe, right? Just like, and yeah, so the convenience store clerk observed this, and when her remains were discovered, when the police called her mother identified that shirt that all of her classmates had signed. The last I followed up, just to talk a little bit more about Desiree, her mom was still living in El Paso and still advocating for missing, abducted, and abused children. So she was trying to carry on Desiree's memory and doing a very valiant job of it. So sweet little baby Desiree. She was just a child. Okay. All right. So as for Dawn Marie Smith, the other set of remains that was found with Desiree, she was only 14 when she ran away in June of 1987. She turns 15 and she remains in contact with her family until August, when all communication stopped. She was reported missing in September, and her remains were also found by those hikers on October 20th. So investigators now have these two stories. They have the rape victim who has reported where she was raped, and the police officers take her over there and they find human remains. And then we have the water utilities worker who goes out, finds human remains, and finds 2 more graves. So now we have 4 confirmed victims and 1 rape victim after he's been paroled. So the police understand that there might be more. Like, this is an issue. Like, this is a serial killer that we have.
Did they know right off the bat that it was probably the same person responsible?
It took them a little while because, it's the 80s.
Yeah.
We don't have like integrated systems, but it's still just all El Paso. It's still, we have this rape victim in this location and these 2 victims, same thing. So they, at that point, they're like, we think we have something here. And the technique back then in El Paso, at least, was the investigators and detectives and police, they went out to that area and they would take these long, like spikes and put them in the ground. And then when they took them out of the ground, they would smell the end of it. And if it smelled like decomp, they knew that they would have a body in that area.
Love that. Love that for us.
So when I'm sorry, like, this might be me being a mom of boys, but it's almost like,
it's
smell my finger.
Well, I don't know if when you guys are doing laundry, do you just sort of randomly do the smell test without thinking about it too much?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I do that when I'm getting dressed in the morning. Like,
yeah,
no, still good.
Yeah,
that's your laundry.
After 3 days, it's fine.
That's your laundry. That's no one else's. But like, when you have teenage boys, you do that on accident, and you're like, huh?
Yep. Yeah.
That
no,
was a
you never do
mistake.
the random smell my finger. Never.
That was
You never
definitely
smell
a
the finger.
mistake. You never smell the finger. Quick anecdote, just on the side. My oldest, you two know who he is. About 12 years ago, blah, blah, blah. He was like, let's see, 12, 7 years old.
6, 7. Yep.
He like contortions himself to bring his like foot up to his nose and smells his own foot, and then goes, and we're in the car. He's in the passenger seat. I'm driving a stick shift.
Yep.
And he's like, smell my foot. And before I can even say like, no, I have a shoved large toe up my nose. And I'm like, ugh.
I have had this happen recently. This is a recent occurrence. So
never smell their feet.
No,
ladies and gentlemen.
It's a bad call.
It's a bad call.
Picturing
Voluntarily or
involuntarily. You're just no.
Yeah, like I would imagine that the smell is similar to what they were doing with the spikes. It's a similar smell. It's a similar experience.
I've never smelled a dead body, but if I were to smell one, I would imagine that it would smell similarly.
This is going to sound weird because I've smelled a lot of them, but it's not in a weird context.
You might have to explain that. You might have to explain that at some point, but not right now.
Yeah. We'll just say that there was a very legitimate reason why I was around decomposing bodies. So yes.
Oh, that's the end.
I think I like the little hook of mystery. No, I worked out of the medical examiner's office for a little while, so it's just
important. I think that's important.
It's important information.
It's important information.
Sunny's just like, not to be weird. I smelled a lot of dead bodies.
We've
and
lost
that was
all of our listeners right
that
now.
was the end of the sentence and the story.
I know. I'm not over here like like no. There's a professional context.
It makes it seem weird. You're like, okay, not to be weird. I smelled a lot of dead bodies. That's not weird. Okay, AJ, continue on.
Anyway, continue on.
We know you. They don't know you.
There's a legitimate professional reason why it's just.
They're like, what are you, a mob boss? Are you a hitman? Like, those are legitimate
in a very professional and respectful fashion. It's just that it's part of. It's just part of being at the medical examiner's office.
You had to smell a lot of dead bodies. There's nothing you could do.
There's nothing I can do.
Nothing I could do. I live in Staten Island. He lives in New Jersey. I don't know what.
Hey, again, very respectful context for there's an aroma. We're human beings. It's just part of it. It's okay.
I'll
It's
never
all
look
right.
at the word aroma again.
Aroma.
Nope.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So
let's-
beyond the spikes. Beyond the spikes.
Okay, they sniffed the
Continue.
spikes. All right. So after re-interviewing witnesses to the various girls' disappearances, investigators learned that Casio had been seen in the company of Wood shortly before she vanished. Charles Lloyd, who was a witness in the Baker case, told them that Wood knew the victim and often gave her rides on his motorcycle. On the day of her disappearance, Baker had gotten into a beige pickup truck that closely matched Wood's own vehicle. So he had a motorcycle and a beige truck. Friends and acquaintances of Smith also testified that she knew Wood, and they repeated Baker had gotten into a beige pickup truck that closely matched Wood's own vehicle. Friends and acquaintances of Smith also testified that she knew Wood, as they had repeatedly suggested that she got out. Based on the fact that he had kidnapped and raped Judy Brown in October of 1987, he pleaded not guilty. However, as we previously discussed.
I was disgusted. Yes.
I was disgusted. I've been disgusted. Two more shallow graves were discovered not far from where Wheatley and Smith had been found. So one of the victims had been identified as Angelica Frausto. So Angelica was 17, and she had been a chronic runaway since the age of 12. At 15, she quit Henderson Middle School, where she was enrolled in a program for students who struggled with behavior. I had to reword that sentence because the initial description of that was not okay.
Not great.
It was not great. So she struggled with behavior. We don't know why, but she did. She was finally reported missing in September of 1987, and her body was found November 3rd, 1987. On March 14th, 1988, a couple searching for aluminum cars in the desert stumbled upon partially buried remains of a woman located only a few hundred meters away from the other victims had been found. Based on the comparison of x-rays and the jaw, the woman was identified as 23-year-old Ivy Susanna Williams, a Colorado native who had moved to El Paso after getting married. Williams, who had a record for prostitution and drug possession, was last seen on May 30th, but her disappearance was not reported by either her friends or her family. During interviews with acquaintances, police determined that she had worked as a dancer at a club and was affiliated with members of a biker subculture. So just like a little footnote, when he went to prison the second time, he quickly became part of the biker club culture in prison. And I think that was a way to protect himself, so that when he got out, he was still very much part of this biker club culture. So he had this bike. He had
real quick, AJ. I just want to say, you said that she had issues with drugs and things like that. I know before I had intimate experience of what it is like to deal with somebody who is a drug addict, I always would want to judge, why wouldn't you report them missing right away? It is so hard whenever you're dealing with somebody that does have that affliction, because you just regularly lose track of them for weeks. And then they just pop back up and I'm clean now for good, I promise. So don't throw shade.
It's hard.
Not us.
No,
not us.
It's hard.
Yeah.
All 10 of our listeners.
And it's the 80s, and it's like you're saying, you lose track of those people. And so it's not their fault for not reporting them, but she just ultimately was not reported missing by anybody.
It's so sad.
And that's ultimately what it is. It's just very heartbreaking that was the circumstances. So the coroner's report also found that Williams had been stabbed multiple times, including to the face, as she was found in the area that had previously been searched. The El Paso department resumed an operation to locate more potential burial sites. So at this point, they're looking for more potential areas, but they don't come up with anything new. And it wasn't until June 16th, 1988, that Wood was found guilty of kidnapping and raping Judy Brown. As this violated conditions of his parole because he had been jailed previously, it was considered an aggravating factor, which resulted in a total of 50 years imprisonment. After his arrest, Wood was placed in county jail, where a number of inmates claimed that he boasted of his crimes, describing the victims as topless dancers and prostitutes whom he had lured into his truck with the offer of sharing drugs, but instead drove them to the desert, tied them to his truck, then raped and killed them before burying their bodies in shallow graves near the road.
So awful.
Eventually, based on highly circumstantial evidence and not entirely reliable information, the El Paso County District's Office charged Wood with the murders of Williams, Wheatley, Baker, Frausto, Calcio, and Smith. So what does this mean? This means that they had a very strong circumstantial case, but there wasn't very credible physical evidence just yet. So as a sort of side note, certainly not a footnote, and certainly something to explore later, there were 3 other disappearances that occurred within this very specific chronology that fit the MO, that fit the descriptor of David Leonard Wood. So the following: the bodies of Marjorie Knox, 14, Cheryl Lynn Vasquez Dismucus, 19, and Melissa Alanis, 13, were never found, and their fate remains unknown.
Oh.
But Wood remains the sole suspect in their respective cases. And even as of today, that is still the case. All right,
Wow.
so now we're up to 9, a possible 9, for sure 6 that he's being charged with. In November 1992, based on the testimony of Judy Brown, the inmates at the county jail and the results of the exhumation of the lint found in the vacuum cleaner. So this is new information. So at the time, Wood had a girlfriend. And in some newspaper articles, I've also seen her listed as like his roommate, but not his girlfriend.
So some kind of something.
I think he called her his girlfriend, and I think she called herself a roommate.
Oh, there it is.
I think that there's the distinction. So during this time frame, she tells investigators that she saw David like doing an extensive cleaning on his car and his truck. There's another thing, like when you say car in El Paso, it really could mean van, truck.
It could mean many things.
It could mean many things. It's like, do you ever drive a car? Yeah, what kind? A Ford? Ford what? You know, it just could go on.
It's the Coke equivalent. It's fine.
So his roommate / girlfriend / neither of the above testifies that he used a vacuum cleaner to clean out his truck, and investigators seized that material and analyzed it, but that might be problematic later. Okay, so eventually Wood was convicted of the 6 murders by a jury verdict and was officially sentenced to death on January 14th, 1993. So I say that as kind of like a M. Night Shyamalan twist, like there's the end. But let me take you a little bit further back. Okay.
If you were gonna say he got out
But
again,
wait,
I was gonna
there's
throw my
more.
computer.
Let me just take you a little bit back.
Like we gave him 2 months, and then he got out again. And he was a
Due
model.
to the model prisoner, he's so great. The extensive media coverage that this case generated prompted defense attorneys to make sure that the case was not seen in El Paso, but was seen somewhere else. So eventually the case is moved to Fort Worth instead of El Paso. They go to trial. The rape victim is brought to the stand, as well as other character witnesses, or non-character witnesses, I should say. And one of those was of one of the earlier victims, that they had gone to a club. And in David Wood's own testimony, he's like, the girls loved me. Like, I still keep in contact with them. Like, they think I'm so great. Like, they love me. But witnesses to many of his coming and goings were like, he's creepy. He's crazy. Like, he just doesn't look right.
He has a neck beard.
Yeah. So in his mind, he's like God's gift, but in reality, and all the witnesses, they're like, totes not.
those women were also literally doing their jobs
or going to school,
or
Going to
going
school.
or existing.
Existing.
They were going to class. They were walking home from school.
Oh, God, he is
They were
foul.
existing.
They all loved me. They thought I was so
Mhm.
great. Shut up, you worthless piece of shit.
Wears a lot of axe.
So he denies he mean like,
Axe body
I
spray.
didn't kill these women. It wasn't me.
Phoenix.
So he's convicted of all 6 murders. He's given the death penalty.
Wait,
and
what year was this?
This was 1993.
Okay. If you said
Jan-
70, I'm sorry. I had a seizure.
1993. He was given the death sentence. What year are we in?
Right, like right now?
Right now, 2022.
There's no way to know. There's nothing I can do.
There's nothing.
There's
We're all in a simulator.
I don't know.
All in a 3D model.
I don't know.
Ti-
There's
time
no
is
way
a-
to be able to
time's a man-made
confirm
construct.
or deny
Mhm.
what year it is.
Are you gonna give us you're gonna say, and then he was killed in prison justice
Via
Yay,
machete
yay, happy ending, right? That's what you're gonna that's not what you're gonna
with
say.
a board with nails in it.
Since his conviction, Wood has continued to insist on his innocence. And with the help of his attorneys, he has filed several appeals, thankfully, all of which has been denied thus far. His original execution date was scheduled for August 20th, 2009, but the day prior to that, it was postponed thanks to yet another legal appeal filed by his lawyers who
Great.
claimed that their client showed signs of mental illness. So if you're familiar with the death penalty, you cannot put a person to death who suffers from mental illness. So since an early time when he was younger, his IQ was measured below that of a normal IQ range, which IQ is just not even a relative unit of measure.
Yeah.
As it never was, it never will be.
Nope.
But at the time, that's what they were basing it on. And they were like banking on that. They were like, see, he's got a lower IQ, he's mentally ill, you cannot put him to death. So now we are at his legal defense and prosecution reviewing the legal document. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals ruled that the forensic psychiatric findings were questionable and the psychologist's method for assessing Wood's adaptive functioning were not thorough or reliable. Thusly, the court ruled that Wood and his attorneys had failed to produce clear evidence of his alleged intellectual impairment. So he was given a series of IQ tests and he scored all sorts of in the ranges of like 111 to like 62. Like he like ping-ponged all over the place. So he was rejected. So in subsequent years, no new execution date had been set. And Wood's lawyers filed another appeal in 2016 to have his sentence overturned and a new trial scheduled. They have also petitioned for a DNA test, claiming that this would prove their client's innocence. In addition, they demanded that documents concerning 2 acquaintances of Wood's, the cellmates that he had back in the 80s, that they be unsealed and consider those people as being alternative suspects in the killing. So at that time, we're in 2016 now, the El Paso County Attorney General's office provided one of the shirts of Dawn Smith, the little girl who had got her shirt signed, and it had DNA on it. So that DNA was then submitted, as well as the DNA tests for Angelica Frausto's pantyhose, jacket, and pieces of her hair, as well as Desiree Wheatley's hair and bloodstained knife found among Wood's personal possessions. So prosecutors believe that they could use this in the murder, that he had used this also in the murder of Ivy Williams. So they submit all of this evidence for DNA testing, but all of that evidence comes back as inconclusive.
I could see
solid.
And that could be for various reasons. Contamination.
It's old.
Denature.
I would be on board if he hadn't, if that woman, that survivor hadn't come forward and been like, this dude literally tried to kill me. Because everything, it's very circumstantial. Like, sure, you said you did it, but people say that all the time to get some kind of credit in, prison to maybe not be so much of a target. But bro, you tried to kill a woman and she got
in
away.
the same spot.
Same spot. They
Same
found
spot.
bodies in that spot.
However, circumstantial.
And you admitted to it. Those poor families have to. I feel so bad that like this is the killer, and then it gets drug out for decades.
Appeal after appeal. Thankfully, he's still on death row at that point. So in the end, the results of the DNA tests proved inconclusive, resulting in the dismissal of Wood's appeal. So they dismissed him. They're like, yeah, this doesn't prove one way or the other. We're not going to listen to you. So as of March 2022, he remains on death row at the Allen B. Polunsky unit in West Livingston, awaiting execution.
He's still alive.
On March 17th, 2022, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton filed a motion requesting an execution date of March 15th, 2023 be set for Wood.
Has it been set?
So, yeah, it's been set. 2023, March 15th. I will be tracking this. I will be staying on top of this. And for our listeners, Oxygen put out an incredible episode on this case, Mark of a Killer, and it's really, really good. I would say watch it. It's really good. And he's in our El Paso backyard, and that's like, I was a little girl at this time. It's you recognize these like geographical areas and kind of it's something else. So
bravo,
we're gonna follow up on this on March 16th, 2023.
And wow,
what that looks like.
So
he's been on death row longer than his victims were alive.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's some small comfort to the women that had to experience him existing and his victims' families that he's not getting out.
Yeah.
20 years and he did 6. How many lives would that have saved?
Yeah. At least 6.
At
maybe
least
9.
6.
Maybe 9, maybe more. I'm like always in the camp of like, whatever we have found and whatever we think, there's probably more.
There's always more.
There's got to be more.
He started immediately after he got out of jail the first time.
Yeah.
And the desert is vast, especially around there.
Huge.
So, well,
that's David Leonard Wood, y'all, and he's still alive.
Well, okay, so we're gonna end it with the shit sandwich because that was a bummer, and
you promised us.
I promised. So to end the shit sandwich, I would recommend you to visit El Paso and to visit one of the amazing landmarks there. Do you like gum? Do you like water slides? If so, have I got a place for you to visit? Please go to Wet and Wild, where not only will you see the Virgin of Guadalupe tattooed on at least 50% of the people's backs there, but you will also be able to walk through an amazing archway full of historical remnants coming from the chomping mouths of many El Pasoans. So I highly recommend you to not only try out El Pasoisms for yourself, but to visit one of our many amazing landmarks there.
Guys, what's the name of the taco place we go to that serves you margaritas after the bars close?
Oh, not Chico's Tacos.
No, it wasn't Chico's.
Carlos and Mickey's?
It was a fast food taco place.
Taco Cabana.
Oh, you're talking about Taco Cabana.
Taco Cabana.
Taco Cabana.
Oh, yeah.
Margarita.
You go to two places when you are at like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. You go to Whataburger and you go to Taco Cabana.
Oh, but Taco Cabana has that salsa bar. You get a margarita at 5 a.m.
And they're fresh tortillas. Yum.
Oh my God, the fresh tortillas, you see them making them. But El Paso, it's one of those places where unless you live there, you're like, why would I visit? And then when you live there, you're like, oh my God.
It is.
Then you want to tattoo La Virgen de Guadalupe on your back. You're like,
yes, you do.
Yeah.
El Paso is
really
underrated.
It's so underrated. It's such a great place to be.
But not if you're a victim of David Leonard Wood.
But not if you're a victim of David Leonard Wood.
And it really sucks.
Otherwise, 0 out of 10.
0 out of 10 would not recommend.
Well, if you would like to follow us on social media, you can simply search us on Instagram or Facebook at Bourbon, Wine, and True Crime. And you can also send us an email telling us how much you love the podcast at bourbonwineandtruecrime@yahoo.com. And please leave us a 5-star review. Anything below 5 stars, you can just keep those opinions to yourself.
Please like, subscribe, and comment below. We would appreciate it.
And until next time, bye.
Bye.
Love you.
Bye now. There's nothing I could do.
Nothing I could do.
Nothing I could do.